Welcome to the Wildlands Garden, and today we're going to be looking at our compost and our compost bins and how to make compost. So you'll see on the left side we've got a relatively full bin, which you can see is quite fresh. It's got tissues and kitchen waste on the top, straw under that, and it's been layered, which I'll come back to in a minute. And then this one here, which is almost empty, is last year's compost that's already composted and is being used and is ready to be used in the garden. So the plan today is to collect up the remains of the compost here in the wheelbarrow behind me, take it down, use it in the garden, and save some of it to mix with potting compost for repotting of plants later in the month or early spring. And then we're going to move everything from the left bin over to the right bin. Now, we've been particularly lazy or useless on our compost because you're supposed to turn it regularly to maintain an equal spread of moisture and also to get oxygen in it to help with the composting process. So our pile here is what's known as cold compost. It takes 6 to 12 months for cold compost to compost to a point where it's usable in your garden. And there's a lot of debate about whether you should just pile it up and leave it for up to a year, or whether you should turn it. Charles Dowding suggests that you should pile it up to this sort of height at the very beginning and then turn it once around 5 weeks and then just leave it for over 6 months. And at some point between 6 and 12 months, you'll have compost that you can use. Cold composting is very organic and quite woody, so you might have to either sieve it or take some of the woody bits out. And also it arguably creates a better compost that is good for your garden. The other method is the hot composting method, sometimes referred to as the Berkeley method. And hot composting basically relies, as its name suggests, on the heat from the activity inside and the microbes, creating a heat of 50 to 55 up to 60 degrees. And the Berkeley method can create usable compost in 18 to 20 days. And the way that works is you have to create a pile, not necessarily in a pallet box or compost bin, but you have to create a pile that is 1 metre wide in all directions and 1.5 metres high. You pile it up, so you have to do this in one go. You can't add to it as the days goes on. So you make your pile, and then after 4 days you turn it from the outside in into another pile next to it, and then from that point onwards you then turn it outside in again every 2 days, and at around the 18th, maybe the 20th day, you'll have usable compost. And that's basically using the heat created by the pile. You might have to cover it in a tarp or sacks to stop the rain getting in if it's wet, or if you're in a very hot country, when you're making it you might have to keep it moist. So the mistake we've made, if any, on our cold pile is that we have not covered it. So it's got very wet over the last month with the amount of rain that we've had. And you can see at the bottom where we've kept this chocolatey brown pile, which we're going to use. It's gone quite anaerobic because all the moisture has gone down to this side of the compost. Not a major issue because we've now turned it, but we're now going to cover this with a tarp to keep it drier, so that maybe, if we're lucky, we'll have usable compost in about 3 or 4 months, as we've now turned it. And the anaerobic chocolate brown stuff here we're going to use as a mulch around our perennials and our trees. It's not great for growing vegetables in, but great for mulching around your trees. So that's a result, as we are pruning our trees at the moment. So in a smaller garden situation, you might have a compost tumbler, which is going to compost quicker because you can turn it, roll it every couple of days. So a bit like a smaller version of the Berkeley method, although you do need the volume to get the high heat sometime, depending on your mix. Or you might have just like a rainwater barrel that you chuck in. Make sure your compost is oxygenated. These pallet bins are ideal because you've got the big gaps, and it is essential that you get oxygen. That's why the anaerobic process happens where it gets too wet. There's not enough oxygen, gets a bit smelly as well. So this lovely stuff is last year's compost. You can see it's lovely, and it's all organic, quite coarse, but super nice, ready to use. So I'm going to mix that with bagged compost, and then that'll be used for potting on. So I'm going to save that, and then the wheelbarrow that's now 3/4 full behind me is going all the way down there to the pumpkin patch, which is part of the new market garden, and also the chocolate brown stuff that we talked about a minute ago that's a little bit anaerobic. That's also going to go down there. I've checked with Missy, rather than mulching trees as I suggested, we're going to take it down, spread it on the pumpkin patch, because there's nothing organic on there at the moment, and then that'll be ready for when the pumpkins are planted out, probably in about 3 months' time, so it'll have already rotted down a bit more. So it's a win-win on the compost. Thanks once again for coming to the Wildlands Garden to listen to my waffle on composting. And if you're composting, it'd be great if you could head on down to the comments and let me know what method you use and what successes and possibly failures you've had, any advice you've got on composting or any advice you want. And as we're a new channel, I'd be most grateful if you could subscribe to stay in touch with our gardening here at the Wildlands Garden in central Portugal. And we look forward to seeing you very soon with another episode on our gardens. So thanks very much for watching tonight's episode, and we'll see you very soon. Ciao.